Good morning, everyone. Today, we begin an important discussion in strategic management by understanding different schools of thought on strategy formulation. Before we start, I want to ask a simple question. If two organizations have the same resources, why does one become extraordinary while another remains average? Think about it for a moment. Strategic management tries to answer this question. It is not simply about making plans, it is about creating direction, making choices, and building the future. Traditionally, strategy was seen as a process of analysis and planning, but later, scholars argued that organizations also learn and adapt while moving forward. This led to different schools of strategic thinking. Today, we will focus on two influential perspectives represented by or two influential approaches represented by Michael Porter and Hamel and Prahalad. One focuses on positioning in the market and the other focuses on learning and capability building within the company. Now, let us understand the first major school known as the positioning school associated with Michael Porter and compare it with the learning school represented by Hamel and Prahlad. Positioning school is also known as Occidental school, means Western companies following strategies, especially in America. Occidental school of thought was propagated by Michael Porter. One important practice by American companies was fit. That is, there is need to understand by companies what their competitors are doing and in which area they are lagging behind. Once the gaps are identified, should the companies fit themselves in those gaps? They focus on the companies following the positioning school, or Michael Porter emphasized that these companies focus on resources, competitive advantage, and had external orientation, that is the market orientation, or looking out in the external marketplace and looking down towards the product or service. The main standpoint of this school of thought was that they did not involve all the levels of employee in decision making. There was a strict dichotomy between top and other levels of management, and the decisions, the strategy formulation took place at the top level of management. So, after Second World War, when strategic planning as a force was evolving, simultaneously this Occidental school of thought came into picture. And the companies, most of the Western companies, followed the combination of fit, resources, competitive advantage, the dichotomy between top and other levels of management, and furthermore that we will talk about later. After 1970s, and before going that, businesses were doing very well. Western companies, Ford, General Motors, and many other companies were doing very well in their respective industries and respective segments. But after 1970, it was felt that one important factor was emerging, which was a threat to American companies. It was Japanese practices, and it was called, or the Japanese practices which were followed by Japanese companies, or that new force which was there, created another school of thought, that was Oriental school of thought, propagated by Hamel and Prahlad, and also known as learning school, also known as learning school of thought. Please ignore these verses. The Oriental school of thought, or the learning school of thought, propagated by Hamel and Prahlad, focused on Japanese companies' rise, and stressed on stretching the company's activities. So, Japanese companies were focusing on resourcefulness. By stretching, I would say that having that level of ambition which is very difficult to achieve, but then companies with its meager resources tries to achieve those, and have a high level of aspirations. Presently, there is not any fit between company resources and aspirations, company resources and ambition, but that ambition is so motivating, it provides a direction and a sense of destiny to the strategist. With that, company stretches itself to attain the objectives, and related to that is the concept of resourcefulness, that is leveraging your resources in such a way that whatever limited means are available, company is able to use those and attain the objectives. By resourcefulness, we mean that, or resource leverage can be achieved by, number one, more effectively concentrating resources on key strategic issues. Secondly, more efficiently accumulating resources. Number three, complementing resources, uh, complementing resources of one type that with of another type to attain high level value. Nextly, conserving resources as far as possible. And lastly, rapidly recovering resources by minimizing the time between payout, expenditure and payback. So, this resourcefulness is attained with the help of resource leverage, that is concentrating resources on key issues, key strategies, accumulating resources, complementing resources, conserving resources, and realizing resources or recovering resources as far as possible. So, another aspect of Oriental school of thought was that, they focused on core competencies. By that time, the idea of core competency, like explicitly it was not there, and the term was coined by Hamel and Prahlad with respect to the capabilities available within the organization, or the practices which the Japanese companies were having or following within the organization. Japanese companies were focusing on resourcefulness. They built their resources and stretched themselves. as they were very small at that point of time, and these companies focused on core competencies. So, all these three are related to each other. And with those resources, the main standpoint of these companies was that they involve the people in decision making. They understood the importance of people in the organization, and their internal orientation was to give empowerment to the employees of the organization. So, when Japanese companies focused on core competencies as an internal orientation, they also focused on the employees, their skills, their capabilities, buildings, or they also focused on their skills, their capabilities, building inherent core competencies. So, core competencies on the one hand is related to stretch and resourcefulness, and simultaneously is related to the skills and involvement of the employees also. So, after 1970s, it was felt that one important factor is emerging, and it is a threat to American companies. Here we have found that Japanese companies focused on resourcefulness, and they built their resources and stretched themselves as they were small. So, once they have mastered the skills, no one can beat them. And this led to our understanding of two different approaches, that is Porter's and Prahlad's approach to the strategic decision making or strategic management. So, we try now to understand why Porter and Prahlad remain central to strategic management even today. Two broad schools of thoughts are associated with each one. Porter helps managers answer external questions. Where should we compete? How should we position? What creates competitive advantage in the market? On the other hand, Hamel and Prahlad help answer internal questions. What can the company become? Which capabilities should the company develop? How can people contribute to strategic growth? So, strategic management becomes incomplete if we focus only on competitions and ignore organizational capabilities. Porter's logic is analytical and market oriented. Prahlad's thinking is future oriented and innovative driven. Strategic intent proposed by Hamel and Prahlad means creating an obsession to win and continuously moving towards long-term leadership. Strategic intent is not a short-term target. It is a sustained ambition that energizes the entire organization. Imagine trying to reach a destination that appeared impossible today, but becomes possible through learning and capability building. Learning through stretching the resources, leveraging the resources, building core competencies which can be utilized into different strategies, which can be utilized into different markets. Modern organizations combine both approaches, that is external positioning and internal transformation, to create long-term success. According to Hamel and Prahlad, four approaches of competitive innovation were evident in the global expansion of Japanese companies, because the Oriental school of thought is dependent on the activities, depending on the strategies followed by Japanese companies. So, Hamel and Prahlad have categorized those strategies into four broad categories, namely building layers of advantages, searching for loose bricks, changing the term of engagement and competing through collaboration. Let us explore each in detail. So, let us explore the first strategy observed in successful Japanese firm, that is building layers of advantages. Instead of depending on one strength, organizations gradually create multiple advantages that reinforce one another. Hamal and Prahlad illustrated the example of Japanese color television. Japanese color television industry to understand the layers of advantages. And this is still important to understand how companies can create layers of advantages even today. They argued that by 1967, Japan had become the largest producer of black and white television sets. By 1970s, it was closing the gap in color television. By 1970s, it was closing the gap in color television. Japanese manufacturers used their competitive advantage at that time in the form that first they had lower labor cost. This low labor cost they used to build a base in color television. So that was first layer of advantage. And with that they created private label business. I hope you are aware of the private label. Then they moved quickly. After this, they moved quickly to build established world scale plants. That is another layer of advantage. So, world scale plants were developed, and this investment which they had gave them another layer of advantage, that is quality and reliability. Uh, in their operations or in their products, and further cost reduction. Further cost reduction from process improvement. So, we can say another advantage, their processes were improved. Till now, many layers of advantages are there. After that, when the process improvement took place, they recognized that cost advantage which they are having, it is vulnerable to changes in the labor cost, process and product technology that was changing, exchange rates, trade barriers, as well as the regulatory policies with respect to the given business. So, throughout they also invested heavily in building channels and brand. So, initially it was private label business, now they started building channels and creating brands. So another layer of advantage was created with this, that was creating franchisees in the global markets. After that, they enlarged the scope of their business. By having grand investments and leveraging the products and services. So, by 1980s, all the major players all the major Japanese players had established regional manufacturing also. In those countries where they entered. So, regional manufacturing and design centers, I'll say, were also there. To tailor the products more closely to the national markets. So, these were the practices which most of the Japanese companies were doing in their specific businesses, but particularly Hamel and Perlat talk about Japanese color television industry, where they started with low labor cost or got the benefit of low labor cost and then kept creating layers of advantages. Competitors can take away your one advantage, but they cannot take away of all of your advantages. That's why with the help of these layers, they were able to give a tough competition to their western counterparts. Now we come to another approach uh, or strategy identified by Hamel and Perlad, that is searching for loose bricks. They said that Japanese companies were searching for loose bricks, that is exploiting the benefits of surprises. It is it is just as useful in business battles as is in the war, particularly in the earlier stages of a war for global marketplace. And we know that successful new competitors work to stay below the response threshold of their strong competitors or more powerful rivals. To find the loose bricks, managers must have understanding of breaking into a market or challenge competitor. So, what the Japanese companies were doing? Japanese companies have found a loose brick in each country where they entered. It means they were not following the similar strategy in every market. They were adapting to the market as per the requirement. They did it with careful analysis of the competitors' conventional wisdom in that industry, in that market. That is, how does the company define its market? What activities are more profitable? Which geographical markets are too difficult to enter or too troublesome? So, Hamel and Perlat talked about Honda, a company which took on the leaders in the motorcycle industry. For example, it began with products that were just outside the conventional wisdom or conventional definition of the competitor's market segment or market domain. So, outside conventional market domain, that was the first thing. The competitors or the companies were heavily focused on a given market. As a result, Honda could build a base of operations under undefended territory. So, when Honda took on leaders in the motorcycle industry, say for example, it began with products that were just outside the conventional wisdom of the competitors, conventional wisdom of the companies that were operating in that particular business. This conventional wisdom, I would say, is with respect to the market domain or the market segments. As a result, it could build a base of operations in undefended territories, undefended market segments. That part of the market which is not occupied by the market leaders in that industry. And what many competitors failed to see was Honda's strategic intent and its growing competence in engines. So, its strategic intent was very clear, that was to outnumber the competitors in this particular business, and secondly it was their core competency lies with engine making, and it made all the difference. Honda's progress in creating a core competency in engines should have warned the competitors at that point of time, but they were involved or focusedly, they were very narrowly focused toward on their products only. They were not concerned that what the competitor or what the new entrant is doing. So, it should have warned them, but they did not got any idea about the bigger competition Honda would be giving to them in future times to come, So, Honda's progress in creating a core competencies in engine uh, helped them to enter in a related series of related businesses such as automobiles, lawn mowers, marine engines, generator sets, etc. But each company was concerned with its own market. So, lawn mowers, they were concerned with their own market. Motorcycle manufacturers were focused on their own market. Business leaders were involved with their own businesses. But Honda was doing what? Honda has developed core competency in engine making, which is the main component or the driver of quality and success in different products, having presence in entirely different industries. But one thing was common, and that was engines have to be installed in each of these products. So, with this kind of core competency, Honda did what? Honda had horizontal diversification. Horizontal diversification in the sense that it entered into the related businesses and it went unnoticed for a long time. In protecting loose bricks, the company must extend their peripheral vision, should not be focused only on the core products and services, but what market segment is unattended. A new competitor may enter into that market segment, and no entry barriers have been developed by the present companies in that particular market. And after gaining expertise in that market segment or in that market, the new entrant may come into your market also. So, that is very strong, clear lesson to the strategist, to the companies, that they must anticipate the global competitors across product segments, businesses, national markets, value added categories, value added stages and distribution network, so on and so forth. Another important concept which Hamel and Prahlad talked about or strategy with respect to discuss the Oriental school of thought is changing the terms of engagement. Changing the term of engagement refers to refusing to accept the competitor's definition of industry. Refusing to accept competitor's definition of industry, of its market forces. The way the competition is fought in that market. Say for example, Hamel and Prahlad have talked about uh, the photocopier business. During the 1970s, both Kodak and IBM tried to match Xerox business systems in terms of segmentation, products, distribution, service and pricing in photocopier industry. As a result, Xerox, which was the market leader, main force in that industry, had no trouble decoding the new entrants' intentions and developing counter moves. So, when intentions are clear, counter moves the companies can make. We say action and reaction of the competitors. So, when actions and intentions are clear, because you are following, the company is following the same segment, the company is following the same tactics, the company is providing the same products through the same distribution channel, the same kind of service, then the market leader is easily able to respond. So, was able to provide the counter moves very easily. What happened? IBM left the copier business. On the other hand, Canon was a company which changed the terms of engagement. It changed the entry barriers. Instead of imitating the leaders' strategies with respect to market, product and distribution, it developed entirely new ways of doing things. So, Canon chose to distribute standardized machines and components to reduce cost. Standardization was done to reduce cost. Then Canon chose to distribute through office product dealers rather than office product dealers, rather than matching the service networks adopted by Xerox. Canon built reliability and serviceability into its product and then delegating the service responsibility to the dealers and not to the sales force. So, Canon copiers were sold rather than leased. And this selling rather than leasing, freeing Canon from the burden of financing the lease base. Canon appealed to the secretaries and department managers for selling the product. That thus at each stage of the way product is developed, the attributes provided in the product, the services, at that time usually the product delivery and service was the responsibility of the company itself. So, at every stage distribution, product, service, quality, reliability, the company did, Canon did what? Canon searched a loose brick at every place and then came out with its own terms of engagement. So, all the three, that is building layers of advantages, searching the loose breaks, and changing the terms of engagement. All these three are integrated to each other. And what happened because of this? Xerox was paralyzed for some time because it already invested heavily into its products, into its infrastructure, into its sales force, etc. And it was not very easy to respond in such a case, and it happened with Xerox. But later on, Xerox also, after many years, it also regained its competitive position. But in the immediate situation, it could not do anything. Now we come to the last strategy adopted by, covered under Occidental school of thought, adopted by Japanese companies, that was collaborating for competing. At first, collaboration and competing may sound opposite to each other, but in strategic management, they often coexist. That we will discuss later on in strategy formulation at the corporate level. Organizations collaborate to gain knowledge, share resources, enter new markets, and accelerate innovation while still competing independently. So, through licensing, franchising, outsourcing, strategic alliances, joint ventures, it is possible to win without fighting. In the consumer electronic world, say for example, Japanese competitors attack traditional businesses and volunteer to manufacture next generation product. Collaboration can also be used to calibrate competitive strengths and weaknesses. Say for example, Toyota's joint ventures with General Motors, Mazda with Ford gave give automakers an invaluable advantage at that point for assessing the progress that US rivals have made in cost reduction, quality and technology. And simultaneously with those joint ventures, the companies were able to enter into a new market segment. In the next few slides, you will find that certain other key features are associated with positioning and learning schools. Now you can go through this at your own. I am leaving you with these slides. This is all for today. In the next part, we would be discussing, we will take a case study to talk about certain components or the modules that we have covered in this particular, all the earlier 4 sessions. These are few references which you can go through. Thank you very much.